It's Friday, and I'm back with the next in our Fanzine Friday series. Today we're taking a look at Miser's Hoard number 3. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer. This is our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. Each week on the Fanzine Friday series, we take a fanzine from my collection off the shelf for a closer look. And today, from 1983, it's Miser's Hoard number 3. Hope you enjoy the video. We're continuing this week with our look at Miser's Hoard. It's a fanzine put out in the United Kingdom in the early 80s by John McKeown and others in his play group. This fanzine is in about 20 pages. It's the size we're used to. Heavy stock green cover. It's a little greener than it appears in the video. Paper folded in half and then stapled through the middle. And again, I'm enjoying these. I think they're quite nice. Let's take a look at the cover. This one has a sort of traditional Catholic religious theme to it. You'll remember their adventures have some references to saints, and that continues in the adventure that's in this episode. I would guess, based on how they describe it, this might be St. Jerome or their idea of St. Jerome, but in any event, we've got that sort of symbolism here. They do have some attribution finally for the art. Most of this art's done by Megan Evans, and there's another artist who's given some attribution. We'll mention him in the contributors. I think this is, this art is okay. I think the priest there is probably a little bit better than the supplicants, but in any event, the art's fine. Their editorial, they continue to ask for contributions and mention that all their contributions are being done by their home group. They do say they're doing better than they thought, and they might go from quarterly to bi-monthly. This issue, number 3, came out around July of 1983. And they mention in here that they received the first fanzine that has papal dispensation from the Catholic Church, the Sylvester II Golden Broomstick Award. They announce that they have, John announces that they have won. Heroism and Humanity is an article about alignment in the Dungeons & Dragons or other fantasy games. The Jade Cat is continuation of their adventure. Postbag is their letters column. On the Rack is their review of new items that have come out in the role-playing game world. The Cult of Genert, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, is for RuneQuest. Weaponless Combat is exactly what it is, discussion of weaponless combat in D&D. And finally, Fanzine reviews. John McKeown and Ian, his brother, John Watkins, David Nilsson, John Wilson, and Colin Bartram all are given credit for some of the work, including people who wrote reviews. And then Megan Evans and Mark Hilditch are given credit for the artwork. Heroism and Humanity, again, is a discussion of alignment. They essentially don't like it. I don't think it works very well in the role-playing setting, and their primary complaint is that people don't really use alignment, that they default to what's in their best interest of their character, gaining power, levels, experience, whatever it may be. And that if you do try to impose some type of morality or other restrictions from alignment on your characters, it's going to really kind of tends to mess up your game. And so they say, essentially scrap that and think about character motivations instead, whether that's you want to build a traditional D&D, right? You want to build a castle and a kingdom. There's some love interest or knowledge or something that your character's after, and to think about that in more practical terms, and then really focus on the ability to move your character towards achieving that end. They indicate that they have some type of a point system that they utilize, but they don't really go into detail about how they do that. Points that you accumulate that help you get towards your goal. But they don't really get into any discussion about how they do that as a game mechanic. There's an article, or not an article, there's an advertisement here for some new miniatures from Citadel, and I know some folks really enjoy miniatures, so here these releases are. They're Monk Thieves, Elves, and Undead. And I'm not familiar with all these, but I like the look of them. Then we have Jade Cat. Their adventure continues from the last adventure, and I don't think it's over. It doesn't read like it's over. But the end of the last adventure, if you went all the way through, you would have found this scrap of paper, which was a clue. And you'll remember that you're after this Jade Cat, which was supposed to be able to hold these 2 demons that the Saint Jerome had imprisoned. And what you knew in the last adventure where you're gathering some clues. You sort of learned who had gotten a hold of this Jade Cat and that he had left the town. And so you were going to set out after him. The clue there on the paper at the end of the first adventure gives you sort of an idea of where to head, right? So you head off after this guy. Along the way, again, well done. You've got some wilderness travel encounters that you're going to get along the way that, you know, may give you some clues, and then ultimately you'll find your way to this ancient wizard's tower or home. I guess it's not really a tower. And there's lots of interesting things to work your way through there. This one, again, is more of an intellectual than a hack and slash adventure. I think those tend to be kind of challenging for a lot of players because it's all real easy when you read it and understand it. But when, in my experience, when players come into those situations, they can go all over the place, right, without clues. And there aren't really very many clues here to explain this, what's going on. And so you may have a really hard and frankly frustrating time trying to figure it all out. But for those who like this type of adventure, again, I do think this one's really well done. It's not overwhelming in size or scope, and the challenges can be figured out eventually, I think, through good use of logic. And again, this one is probably one long session playtime. Then we have Postbag, which is their letters column, and they have some feedback from last time where, remember, they reviewed Imagine #1, not particularly favorably. Pete Tamlin writes in from the magazine and says, look, we're trying to do better, and we think we will. Some other people shared their impression that Imagine was not a particularly worthwhile periodical, that it had, you know, too much self-promotion in it and not enough stuff that people could really use in terms of creative ideas. And then the editor does mention that they mention Miser's Hoard, but they misspell the name of their fanzine as H-O-R-D-E. Tony Ellum from the Palantir, which we did review those, writes in to say that he has discontinued producing the Palantir, and we shared with you his note that he sent subscribers when he wrapped up the last issue of that fanzine. And then Matt Quartermain writes in to say the only good Zine's a dead Zine. So I don't agree with his opinion, but he just like rips them up and says all these fanzines are just worthless, and he names them. So this is interesting because I like talking about fanzines. Saga, Hounds of Avatar, Doombook of Chaos, Tales from Tanelorn, Ringwraith's Shadow, Tempestuous Orifice, Poleaxed Patriarchs, I'd never heard of that before, and DragonRoar. Hadn't heard of that one before either. And he says they're all similar, and just like the Imagine professional magazine, none of these are worth the paper they're printed on. They're just wasting everybody's time. And so he says to these guys, you should just go ahead and fold up and quit now because you're not doing anything worthwhile for the hobby. So he had a clear, cheers, he says at the end, a clear opinion about that, and it wasn't particularly favorable. So that's it for our letters column. Next we have On the Rack, which is where they do some reviews of something recent that's come out. In this issue, they review Standard Games and Publications, which is a British-based game company, and 3 of their recent releases. City of the Sorcerers, where you have a wizard, and the first part of the game is you sort of training that wizard, gaining spells or magic items, which they thought was really well done. And the second half of the game then turns into a sort of arena-based combat, which they thought was not as well done. The next game is called Starship Captain, which is a sci-fi based game which they thought was pretty good, but a little expensive, and thought maybe they could have done some things to make it not cost quite as much, but otherwise it was well executed. And then finally Cry Havoc, which is a war game where you have 2 different, factions, medieval time period, and you set up and play. They thought it went pretty well. Components were good, and it was fun to play, but not super realistic, and not, and probably that's why I played a little easier. And here's copies of the artwork that maybe gives you, it's a little hard to see, but gives you some view of the covers for those games. The Cult of Jennert, which is a RuneQuest-based cult, sort of an earth god, and they give you an explanation of him. I don't play RuneQuest, and I don't totally follow this because this god is has very few followers. They're all peasants and farmers, largely forgotten. So my general sense is if you were in RuneQuest, I don't think you'd ever want to be involved with this, but maybe you add it for a little bit of flavor in an adventure or something like that. Then there's a really short article here from Peter Young, which was quite good, so I did want to mention it. It's called Weaponless Combat. And if you've read the Dungeon Master's Guide and ever tried to wade your way through pummeling, grappling, and overbearing, those rules are really hard. And he makes the observation, which is totally accurate, that it's very difficult to do that at the table, because there's all these things you have to do, and you have to sit there and calculate and get a few numbers from the player and calculate a percentage roll, and then use the opponent's armor class and some other things, and you know, and plus it also is hard to figure out what exactly Gary was trying to write. He said he had been making something up sort of ad hoc and just giving it one sort of percentage roll and doing it, but now he's come up with this suggestion he wants to share, which is based on die 20 rolls. And so the attacker rolls, and you get to add your strength damage bonus and your dexterity missile attack bonus to increase your number. The other person rolls a saving throw against petrification, which he thought was the best approximation on your character sheet for sort of avoiding this kind of thing. And you also get to apply those rolls. Unless it's pummeling, then the attacker only gets a damage bonus, and the defender only gets a dexterity bonus to try again to do the modification. And so that's basically it. So first you roll to hit, and then they get to make, and which would mean you do hit, and then they get to roll a saving throw, which might allow them to avoid the hit. And that's basically how it works. Now with pummeling, armor can give you a negative modifier. Damage is half for metal, or only 1/4 if the person's wearing plate mail in terms of damage from the pummeling. So if you've ever done it, like I said, you're probably interested in a simpler solution, and this one's not bad. And finally, they have a discussion of fanzines, which I always want to take the time to talk about. DragonLords, it looks like issues 12 through 16 they had in front of them to review, and they said they really varied in terms of the printing quality and the quality of the articles, but all in all, a good fanzine. Quasits and Quasars, they don't say which one they looked at. They said production was a little cheaper, a little below average, but interesting mix of things and a good fanzine, at least their first view of it. Hounds of Avatar, which they like, is the one that's a little more focused on tunnels and trolls. The printing's good, artwork is reasonable, but it's not the greatest thing out there. Fantasy Herald, they say they have issues 1 and 3, and their comment there was that one of the issues they thought was really bad and one of the issues they thought was really good, and so there's I'm not really sure where this fanzine is going to shake out, but we'll wait and see. That's one I don't have, so I'm pretty interested to try and track down a copy or two of Fantasy Herald. SwordPlay, they had issues 1 and 2, which they thought was well done, excellent maps and diagrams, and basically completely focused on scenarios, some Traveler, Dungeons and Dragons mix. And he says the producer said that issue 3 may be suspended, which makes me wonder whether they even ever had it. I'm not sure if I have both issues of SwordPlay or only have one of those, but we'll take a look at that one at some point. And finally, Tempestuous Orifice, which has a variety of different articles in it, but all in all, I thought was pretty good. And here's our rear cover. Again, art is by Megan, and you've got the dragon and the guy there with a big stick, and he's yelling the word fetch, and he's getting ready apparently to toss it. And they do also now here want to tell you that they're offering rate for subscriptions. So that's it for Miser's Hoard number 3 from 1983. Hope you all enjoyed the video and hope you're enjoying the channel, and I hope that you're subscribed. If you have friends who might enjoy our content, please send them our way, and hopefully they will be subscribers as well. Until next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.